When I laid down the first coat, it looked like a highlighter marker, and I thought, man, what have I done? Now I'm gonna have to pierce my eyebrows. So now that I am done painting my car, I've spent the last few evenings wet sanding it. I started at 1,000, went to 1,500 to 2,000. It's taken me quite a while to wet sand it. It's kind of the worst part actually, because I clear coated it and it looked like it was fabulous. I mean, there were like little pockets of things, but then you have to take that clear, beautiful look and sand it, and now it looks like a ruined car again. While I've been sanding it, I just kind of thought of the things that I learned on this little jog down learning lane. Look, as my first time painting a car, what did I take away with it, and what can I get better at? For me, knowing these things, along with all the other stuff I learned next time, are going to help me paint a much better car. And these are things that people didn't talk about that really caught me off guard. And I was in the middle of painting, kind of in a time crunch. And had I been prepared for this, my time crunch would have gone a lot better. The very first thing that stuck out was the importance of primer color. And maybe this is a little bit twofold, but I got the car primered. I started sanding, and there's a couple of spots where I was sanding and I just hit like the last stride. Like I would be sanding like this, and then I wanted to do an edge, and I'd hit like the last stride, and it would take it down to the gray. And I just thought that paint was like, the yellow was just like a spray can of paint. But it turns out that at least this yellow, which was really awesome in the can, this yellow was not like the others. It is not like a can of paint that you would buy at the auto store to do like touch-up paint. It's not like any aerosol can. Thin. It's really translucent. And so like it's up on the front, but on the edge there's a spot maybe like this big that I just tried to cover with yellow, and because it was on an edge it would just run off. So I put 5 coats of yellow on it to cover it, and you can still see it, especially in the sunlight. So number one, the primer, not in any specific order, just the first thing is the primer is very important. The paint is very translucent, and I learned my lesson with that maybe the hard way. One of the next things that I learned was stick to your game plan. So like I said, I laid the primer down and it looked really good, and then my intent was to sand it 400 and then go up to 600. I went to one of the local paint stores where I've been getting like quality supplies, and when I went in there and the lady came over and said, well, what do you need? She asked me what I was doing, what colors I was painting, was I using metallic? And I was like, no, I'm not using metallic. And she's like, oh, then you don't need 600. Everything that I read told me to use 600. So then I thought, oh, well, this is a paint shop and these guys deal with painting a lot, so they know more than I do. Which they obviously know significantly more than I do, because I did kind of a botched paint job. But so I said, okay, and I came home and I just sanded the primer in 400. And then I sprayed the first yellow, and I could see every single like swirl. I could see all my 45-degree cuts with 400. So I thought, okay, well, it's gonna fill in. And again, this kind of goes back to the paint's thin, but it's mostly going to, you got to stick to your game plan with what you're comfortable with. And I laid the second coat. I could still see like all of the sand marks, like I had just sanded it. Then I laid the third coat, and everything I read talked about you need, 2 to 3 coats. The can says 2 to 3 coats. The gallon will cover 2 to 3 coats. And after I got done with the third coat, I could still see all the sand marks, and I didn't know what I was doing. And it flashed off. I sprayed a fourth coat, and then I wanted to get this burn spot, so I sprayed a fifth coat on the hood. And after the fourth coat flashed, the paint kind of melted in and became glossy. But still pretty frustrated about, like, if I just stuck to my game plan and done 600 grit instead of following what she thinks is best for me, then I think I could have got it 3 coats. Another quick lesson that I learned is lighting. That whole side, my garage is dark over there. It only has these 4 light structures. That whole side is dark. When I was painting on that side, it was extremely hard for me to see my overlap, and so I was kind of running blind on that whole side. Luckily, I could see the wet middle mark, and that's all I was going off of. But for running blind, it came out okay. I just should have been prepared for lighting. Another thing that I learned from this, being a new guy, I bought this used air compressor. It's a 80-gallon Cobalt, 5.2 horsepower, 15.8 SCFM at 170 psi, and it has 17.5 SCFM at 100 psi. This thing was immaculate. Like, maybe I have too much power and too big of a tank, but this air compressor, if you're painting your own car, this size is the one to get. This thing has helped me sand my whole car. When I painted my car, it didn't skip a beat. I had no issues with the air compressor. So 80-gallon tank, I'm really glad that I bought it. Just something that I learned, because for a long time I was trying to learn how to do it with a smaller air compressor that I could afford, but I found one used that I was able to afford, and I will never turn back. I will always have a giant air compressor in my life. I set up a paint table right here, and this is where my mixing table was, and it was pretty big. Pouring the paint was extremely terrible. Like, I poured it all over everything. So what I would do next is either protect my floor or which I would be probably an and also find some type of pouring apparatus, because the first half gallon was really hard to pour into the cup, and I lost a little bit of paint. It wasn't anything dramatic, but just noticed, a pouring device where it didn't get on my hands and stuff would have been, I should have been better prepared for that. Clear coat, I used 3/4 of a gallon of yellow for this car, but that's because I did the hood 2 more times than I was supposed to. So, a gallon for a Corvette is enough. The clear coat, though, it uses a lot more than color, is what I learned. But I also did 4 coats of clear coat, but I also don't know how to count coats, because the first coat was more like a tack coat, and I don't know if you count that or not, because it just laid it down. I also picked up some replica Z06 C6 wheels. They're gonna turn out pretty nice. I'll go get some new tires on those tomorrow. These new wheels actually kind of let the car pop a little bit more and looks a lot better than the wagon wheels, in my opinion. Two more things that I learned in this experience that I've been thinking about is number one, racing stripes. So I did this particular racing stripe in the 50s and 60s. They would race and they'd put the stripe on the side of the driver in the international races. It used to just go, it's just a straight stripe that ends in the front. I didn't like the ends, so I flared it out, and then I came back and redid this, as I've talked about already. And the thing that I learned about in this experience is that there's no need to overdo it for your first time if this is your first time. I don't know if the time crunch on trying to beat the weather added to the terribleness of it, or if it's just, I'm sure there's a lot of trick to the trade as well that I don't know about and I need to learn about. I laid the color down and then waited 40 minutes and taped off the yellow, and then I had to do the pinstripe. Well, measuring pinstripes is extremely hard, especially on the awkward off-camber hood section. Overall, you just don't need to make that a complex experience. Rushing through all that caused a lot of issues with the tape. You need to buy a really expensive tape. I thought I had good tape. I learned I did not have good tape. When I pulled it off, there was a significant amount of blow-by over the hood that I tried to gingerly repair. And there was blow-by in probably 5 other spots that really took this from an A paint job down to like a C paint job. So the lesson I learned was keep it simple. So another thing that I learned that I couldn't find in any articles or videos, and I don't know if I didn't do it right or what, but this car is too low to the ground. So to get this running board, I either should have taken it off and painted them on some sawhorses, or I should have lifted the car maybe 6 inches to a foot so I could get a clean spray. My gun, I had to turn horizontal and spray vertical under here. And as I talked about the lighting was really terrible. It was really hard to see my line, and it was really hard to know if I was getting good coverage. And every now and then my gun would choke for fluid because it wasn't tipped towards the vent. So something to be aware of is maybe think about lifting your car. I probably, if I had more time, would have done some ghost runs with my gun and just air to see how I was going to spray. And I had that in my mind to do that, but I never ended up doing that. And when I paint again, it's definitely something I'm going to be aware of. So it took me a little bit to get through those, but those are the lessons that I learned the hard way. That again, I didn't see any forewarning for any of those, and those are the specific things that when I do my next car, I'm going to be looking out for and significantly clean up a lot of that stuff. I hope it helped, gave a little bit of insight. Thanks for joining me on Mr. Roger's Fireplace Corner. Catch you next time.